You're on the ground floor. We want to learn from you. As they say, this is a safe space. Share, get information from other people, and help us learn where you are so we can help you move forward. So let's go ahead and just look at the first item on the agenda here. If I can move this forward. Yes. Okay. So I kind of took another look at this after I went through the surveys. We got about 60 surveys. We've got about 80 or 90 people on the call this morning. So a lot of providers who are in our system. And I went through all of your responses and all the commentary yesterday, and it was extremely insightful and informative. Just to give you a few updates up front, y'all have submitted a lot of Q&As. We've had about 15 questions come in. I have on the second agenda that you got, and Elena can put that in the chat pod perhaps if you don't have access to it. I went ahead and I listed all of those questions that you've submitted that you're waiting for written responses to. And I just had an email from Anson this morning, and he plans to get that out on Monday. So look for those answers, and I thank you for your patience as we work through getting those answers to y'all. So just to go back here to AELTA, just send them. If you've got questions that aren't on that sheet, please send them in. We may be able to get them in by Monday and include them in the next Q&A. So that would be really helpful. So let's see, just a word about demand occupations. That has been something y'all have asked about often over the last couple of times we've met. And I just want to tell you to stay tuned. This is something you have been asking, the same questions we're hearing across the state, across all of our programs. So we're really looking forward to some new guidance coming forward, and help support you on what's going on in demand occupations.
Just a moment, Anne. This is Elena.
Yes.
If you want to go ahead and dismiss, there's a couple of notifications on your computer that are coming up on the presentation.
Okay, I've dismissed just one. I don't see any others.
Okay, perfect. And then if you'll hit mute all under the participants, I don't want to mute you, but that'll be great. Under the participant tab, there you
go. Okay, and can somebody else unmute people, or can people individually unmute themselves?
Yes,
okay.
They can unmute themselves. Mm-hmm.
All right, great. All right, so that will probably eliminate some of the background noise that we've been having and help you to, and just encourage you turn on your microphone when you want to jump in. So thanks, Elena. Okay, so let's go ahead and look at some of what I wanted to finish kind of updating you on. Trainings and teams statewide. I'm going to do a couple of slides on that. You all always ask about who's doing what, and that is going to be a little teaser here. We're going to do that on the next call with you all, because I've taken a lot of time to dig in and look at all the different providers, what different trainings they're doing, and we'll just have a meeting and use that and have that as one of our primary objectives. And we're also looking at what you all have been asking for in terms of sharing resources. So that's forthcoming. And then D, my end of year TA on using MSG report for IETs. My new favorite thing to do is look at MSGs through that new MSG report on IETs. So we're going to be giving you kind of a cheat sheet here just at the end of the year, or in the next actually couple of weeks, so that you can start looking at your programs through the lens of the MSG report and support recording all of those outcomes that you're getting. Okay, this is just a touch base because I've spent a lot of time looking at the trainings that you all have been doing in teams over the last year, and I know everything's changed, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this right now, but I know that you want this information. It'll be the topic, as I said, of the next call. We've got 99 training providers listed in teams serving the about 36 AEL providers. There's 81 different occupational trainings occurring, which is excellent. And I think the core piece you all have really been asking about, who's doing CDL? Well, there's actually 9 programs across the state doing CDL. Who's doing medical assistant? There's 10 programs. There's 23 doing CNA. So we're going to make that opportunity for you all to share and hopefully exchange materials and use that as an opportunity to find out what others are doing and save yourself time if there's a way we can share these resources. So lots of items out there before the pandemic, and we'll give you more details on that as we continue. Okay, so this is an item on the survey, and I'm just going to start here. I've kind of mixed this up a bit because some of these items are obviously really important as you're trying to get to services and IETs, and I just wanted to give you a picture of how many of y'all who responded are able to do these kinds of activities. Student advising, high on your list, great to see. And I know in terms of an IET, that can be particularly challenging. So that was where you all are spending a lot of time and a lot of effort. And I'm sure that takes a lot of one-on-one resources also. So the intake at a distance, you all are accomplishing that. 37, we had about 60 respondents. So this really represents kind of how many of y'all are already down the road there. And these responses came in just over the last week. So we know that y'all are still building capacity here, and particularly on assessment. We've got a lot of new items that have been released on assessment and remote testing. So, you know, I expect if we look at these percentages here in the next couple of months, they'll start shifting too. So that's just kind of a beginning look at what you're doing to get people into your IETs and where the intensity of your services are really sitting. And so I've moved, these were at the end of the survey, and I moved these up because they're really the things that impact the student engagement. And I thought I'd share these at this point, and then we can have some of y'all share some of the activities you are doing with keeping students engaged. So this first question was really, there were 6 different choices in terms of what was the greatest challenge to providing IET services for participants. And this is the one that really had the most dramatic responses from you all. So 43% of y'all felt that having very few trainings that were available for remote instruction was the greatest challenge. And when I put together that you selected 4 as almost the greatest and 5 was the greatest challenge, those results really came to 49%. So I think that's a significant thing that we're starting to get a better picture of as we go forward. So that was pretty dramatic. This one was a little bit surprising to me in terms of the challenges. Those that lack home internet services, from what you all selected as being a challenge, when I looked at the scores, those that chose a pretty heavy challenge and the greatest challenge, we got to about 15% on that in terms of participants that lack home internet services. And when I was looking at this last night, I was thinking, yeah, well, you know, it doesn't account for the fact that maybe somebody in a community with 20,000 individuals put that as a number 5, and somebody in a community of maybe 500,000, it wasn't as much of a priority. So just within that context, kind of keep that in mind. I think there's probably better ways we can start to get that information to you too. So, but it was an interesting perspective. Now, this one was very consistent across the board, and it grew once I looked at the those of you that thought it was a very significant challenge, and some of you that thought it was the greatest challenge. So that's a score of a 4 and a 5. And when we put those together, 37% really say it's a challenge that individuals don't have appropriate devices for accessing services. And we know that in all of the services, and particularly if you're working with integrated education and training and trying to do training remotely, if you don't have equipment that's going to support that, that's certainly a huge challenge. And this one was also really pretty dramatic. Those that had limited digital literacy skills to make engagement effective. So when I just took who said that was like the biggest challenge, it was only 11%. But I guess since all of this list of challenges were significant in some respect, those of you that selected 4, a pretty high priority of a challenge, and number 5, the greatest challenge, the results changed to 42%. So we know that the literacy skills that individuals come in with have a real impact on engagement for their learning. So 42% really made a huge difference. So this is an actual, another one that also had an interesting sidebar to it. A great challenge in terms of the number of y'all that selected 5. This is the greatest challenge, that your workforce training faculty are really not prepared to teach online. We had about 12.5% that chose that as number 5 above all these others that we've been talking about. And when I combined 4 and 5, almost the greatest and the greatest, the results were 32%. So those those fairly significant and very significant challenges, that's really been an insightful item to look at. So I don't know if anything's going on in the chat bar because I can't see it, but I thought we might stop here and talk about, you know, our students coming back in for these services and what's happening when students know that maybe their training program has had to be halted. You know, how are you keeping these individuals engaged? When they come in for training, they want to get their training and their GED and basic skills, and then the pandemic hits. What kinds of things are you doing? So, what have we got going on in the chat pod? I hear crickets.
Hey, Ann, it's Mahalia. There's nothing in the chat right now. There's not any questions.
Okay.
There's not any questions right now, but can you just state again what you're wanting to get in terms of discussion going?
Sure. I want to hear 2 things. How are you keeping students engaged? From what I hear in this, read in the survey, you've got students who began training and then that training was halted and they had to stop going to training. Who can talk about how they're keeping students engaged, either because their training hasn't started, or if they've got training, getting them to both participate in that AEL activity remotely? And I think Sandra or maybe Denise, somebody out there had some really interesting comments about that. Any of y'all want to
This is Denise. Hi, Ann.
Hi, Denise.
I was just going to say, and you know, this is a big issue, and I think it's a big issue whether it's IET or whether it's not. So I think whenever I think about it, it's just the idea of keeping students engaged, period. So when we first, we're going to go, just as kind of my example, and I'll try not to take up a lot of time because, you know, I like to talk. When we first went from face-to-face online, I think that was one of the issues that we all had. No matter the meeting I was in or no matter our own staff where we were like, are they going to be interested? Are they going to want to do it? Is this going to be something that they, not just the technology, but that is going to be a priority for them? And we had a pretty good turnout, as I think many people did, and we found that it worked. We've had mixed results. And so an example I would talk about with IET is that we were going to, right after spring break, do a large intake for educational IET. And so we had a lot of different people we were talking to. And so there was interest even from employers with them coming back and saying they can't come into work right now. It would be a good time for us to be able to send them. We could pay them to go to training even if they were going into an IET, and right now work isn't going to interfere. So I think that's one piece as far as if you're just talking about interest, and then engagement. I think some of the things that we're talking about with engagement, of course, come up as you look at the survey. It has to be meaningful. And I think if there's value to it, and I know for a lot of us, maybe when we moved to remote, I think one of the pieces of value, it wasn't just the course. They knew us already. We were in the middle of classes. And so I think there's different situations for different people depending on, was the student in the middle of a class where they already knew other students and were in the process? Was the student maybe partially in, meaning maybe they completed enrollment forms and assessments, or in our situation, we had a lot of students that were scheduled to intake that didn't get to intake. So anyway, I don't know if I'm answering your question, but that's my beginning.
Yeah, and I think people want to hear that. So, what are other programs finding?
Hello, Anne. This is Region 1.
Great, yes.
Hi there. Yeah. I'd like to go ahead and expand upon what Denise was saying, is that, your teachers in their online presence have to be engaging. And as a matter of fact, in discussions, a lot of teachers were not prepared to give online classes. And it takes a different modality in which to deliver online classes. For example, some of the things I've, shared is that, you've got to lift up your laptop so you can look a certain way. You've got to have the backlighting, all of these things. And the way you inflect and talk, during your online presentations has to be engaging for your students, because it's so easy to get distracted by something else. And tap into your local workforce board. I was in a conversation with Cynthia yesterday from the director's office, and they're wanting to get something going in Starr County where we're at. And at this time, we have a really great phlebotomy program going on over there that I, thank our career navigator, Mr. Trevino, for, and our partner, STC. And the students are engaged, they are working through it, but it is challenging because you can't order MiFis right now. None are available. And in some of the areas that we serve right along the border, impoverished areas, a connectivity is a huge issue. And so even though we want to try and create more programs, the accessibility for students can be difficult.
And this is Nancy Crawford. Can you hear me? Hello?
Yes, we can hear you, Nancy.
Okay.
Yes, Nancy.
We hear you.
Okay. Well, I'm only on audio. I'm not on. I couldn't get on Teams, so I'm only on the phone. So,
Okay.
I would say that the way we kept ours going was because Shara was in constant contact with them. We had 24 IETs going when all this happened, but they were more and more with every passing week getting discouraged, even though she was continuing to do Zoom instruction with them. Fortunately, Tyler Junior College decided to bring back and finish the workforce training that got started, and they're doing it larger rooms and spreading people out. And Sherry, you'll have to remind me, but I think all 24 showed up or close to it, which I don't think would have happened if she hadn't constantly been talking to them. So I think we're going to be able to finish that 24. We have a lot of questions about going forward and making sure that we can keep this going with new students, and it'll depend on what TJC does because they're just testing this right now to make sure it's going to work, and they're having to have smaller classrooms or big, huge rooms where everybody's spread out. But anyway, we're thankful we've got the 24, and I credit Sheriff for staying with them, and she did repeatedly tell me about how she felt like she was losing them. I think she almost lost them a couple of times. So that's our story.
Well, go right ahead. Yeah.
Good morning, Ann. This is Sandra. In Laredo, when this transition started, we were in the middle of a couple of IETs as well. And we were lucky enough that the instructors that were actually teaching these couple of IETs were prepared to go online. They had experience in doing so. In general, for our AEL program, the coordinators did have to do a bit of training for some of the instructors to transition all of the ESL and GED classes into distance learning and online instruction. There were some challenges because yes, some students actually are not willing, even if they have the technology and the internet, to do online. They prefer face-to-face. So that was one of the challenges. But through career navigation and the assistance of the coordinators, they've been able to, to hold on to the majority of them. We are in the process on the AEL side of doing tape testing. And as Nancy mentioned, we will be using rooms that are larger. We will be doing face-to-face. We opted to try doing it face-to-face. As a program, we've had to create a safety protocol that gets approved by our vice president and by our safety and risk manager so that we are even able to go to campus. They're being very, very strict with us. In reference to ATX, I will let Denise talk a little bit about what she is doing.
Great.
Good morning, everybody. This is Denise Flores from Laredo College. Actually, I agree with what a lot of people are saying here. We did, encounter all the same obstacles, but one of the things that helped me and my team out was create kind of like a plan. We created a plan where I distinguish, what everybody's role is going to be, what kind of recruitment we're going to work. We pretty much created an outline, or I created an outline for myself, for my instructors, for my students, for everybody, and it has seemed to help us out. One of the things that we do, I know one of the questions we had received was, how do we handle Zoom? Can we have our students do Zoom classes for 3-4 hours? How do you guys do it? Well, we actually found a more conventional way for the students to kind of not get bored and not feel overwhelmed and just tired and just completely zoom out. The actual virtual class session. So what we do is pretty much, if we have a 2 or 3 hour class, we do a 1 hour Zoom class session, and we have the instructor pretty much create an agenda for us. And I don't know if it's possible, if I can share it. Would it be possible? So
that would be great. Do you have the Teams bar, activity bar?
Yes, I do. Give me 1 second.
Great. So this is really good information to hear from everyone. And while Denise is looking to share here, really appreciate these details and the way that y'all are working through this. So.
Okay, give me 1 second. Can you see my screen?
There we go.
Okay, so this is something that I call the ATX for COVID plan. And this is something of a layout that I use with my instructors. So I have my instructors kind of create an agenda for me to see how the class is going to be, worked with. So this is an example of an adult education contextualized supplemental course that we do for IET. So from 6 to 6:15, the instructor would post a quiz, and they have to answer the quiz and also answer with present and here, so I can see the timestamp at what time they logged in. From 6:15 to 6:25, they have those few minutes to kind of download and review all the materials that are required for the lecture. This can include the terminology, PowerPoint. 6:25 to 6:30, they start logging into their Zoom, and then from 6:30 to 7:30, they do their Zoom course. They go over all the material, and then from 7:30 to 8:30 p.m., they have that much time to submit all the assignments before 8:30 p.m. So this is some way that we've been able to keep our students engaged. They don't get overwhelmed. They feel less pressure, less online stress. Especially with sometimes a lot of our students are texting us, hey, I can't log in because my service isn't coming in. We work with something like this where the students will not be fully on the Zoom class, so they don't feel overwhelmed. Mm-hmm. And same thing we do with our workforce training course. We do, for this one's a little different, obviously. The instructor asks for the students to come in at 6 p.m. for Zoom, and they include the breaks in there. And then from 7:20 to 8:30, they have the students submit quizzes, discussion boards, virtual the terminology, all the assignments that are due. And of course, every Zoom meeting will depend on the interaction between the students and the instructors. We don't always stick to this actual schedule, but this is pretty much an outline that we use for students and for the instructors to kind of have that base and knowledge of what they're going to do for the day. Another thing that we also kind of broke down is what each of our roles have to do. This honestly has helped us keep a lot more organized. And I won't say that we're perfect because we do get a few things here and there that don't come out as we plan it out. But this has been our foundation and our base to keeping our programs alive right now. Just creating a plan and managing all our students. I do want to emphasize, though, that our career navigator has been an angel in this process. She will do virtual meetings with them. She meets with 2 to 3 students every day, just to see what's going on. Hey, are you okay? Do you need any services? Do you need any materials? Can we help you? How can we make this easier for you guys? So I got to give her credit to her, because she does keep our retention up there. And our students do text me, hey, I spoke to Ms. Guayat, and she mentioned that I have to do this, and that. She gave me deadlines. What they want to know is security, and that's what we're trying to offer for the students. And plans offer security. We've noticed that calendars, flyers with details, they offer security in this uncertain times. I don't know if that kind of helped out or kind of give an idea to everybody else, but this has been a very successful way for us to keep our retention, recruitment, and we do have upcoming programs coming up. So we're going to start establishing the same plan for all our upcoming programs. It should be interesting. This is all new to us, but I can't wait. Let's see how it goes.
Those are great resources, especially the way that you've itemized out roles, because all of those roles looks like dramatically shifted to new ways of working, basically.
And we've got a lot of kudos in the chat going on, and a lot of people are asking if y'all would be willing to share your resources with the group here. You can, if you want to, put it in the chat as a link, or provide it to us and we can send that out. We've got some other comments happening in the chat. Ann, is this a good time to discuss those? Okay. So we had a couple people that were talking back when we were asking questions about, what are their plans for, moving forward. And I asked a question in the chat about the fall schedule and how many of them are already in conversations about, the fall schedule. And Rachel out in Del Mar there, she's one of our Accelerate Texas contracts, she said that they have already completed their fall schedule and that they will be moving forward with having, hybrid classes even through the fall. And so there's quite a few comments in there about that. So if you guys are looking for maybe a peer connection, if you're having some difficulties, you know, trying to plan for that. And I brought that up, and I talked to Ann about this yesterday as well, because right now everybody's trying to move to remote learning for summer. But even if classes open back up, and even if we get the go ahead and everything's, you know, good to open these buildings back up, I can tell you that I really do feel that some students are going to be very, very leery about going and sitting in a class with 20 or 30 people just after the, you know, after this happens. And so planning for the fall hybrid courses and continuing these online options for students is definitely something that hopefully you guys are already talking about. The other question was, we had a couple of questions about if a student is not in a live session, do those hours count? So like, I'm guessing, and if you guys can unmute yourselves, you can clarify, but I'm guessing they're talking about like in a situation where a person's doing maybe through Canvas or something like that, and they're just getting assignments and they're working on those assignments, but it's not a full live session. And I just wanted to point everybody back to the guidance that we already have out on that. We've covered that in our FAQ, and you can find that on the TCAL website, and we'll put that in the chat pod here.
And I had a question.
Yeah.
Hi, I'm Jake from Temple College. First of all, Denise, you did an excellent job in putting that together. I just had a question, I guess, that goes in line with what you were just talking about right now. When it's broken up, where you're having your class time live during Zoom or Google Classroom, whatever it may be, that's obviously live contact hours and we can count it. But that second hour where you kind of split up so they can do homework, turn in stuff, is that something that's going to be covered under direct hours? Or does it have to be monitored by the instructor or a proctor for it to count? I mean, I believe it does, but I just wanted to get clarification. Thank you.
So my instructor is still active. I do want to point this out that that extra hour, the instructor is still online. It's kind of like if you're teaching in person, the instructor teaches for an hour and a half, 2 hours up in front. And then, you know, he tells them you have this much amount of time to do your quizzes, to do this and that, but I'll be right here. So the instructor does stay online. The students are still, you know, they're still online, and we can track that they're online working on all their assignments. All the assignments that the instructor does do there have deadlines. So if the first quiz is, he gives them 10 minutes. The quiz opens at 8:10 and it's due by 8:15. You have 5 minutes to complete this. You have to, so he's still interactively engaging with all of them. I don't know if that would be, is this what you're kind of asking?
And Denise, yeah, I like the way you made the analogy to really, you know, old school face-to-face in a sense. You know, you've got a live connection with everyone, but you're not insisting they stare into the camera for all those moments. And they're able to kind of step away and do what they would do in a group setting, you know. So Mahalia, did we specifically address that kind of that kind of approach in the guidance?
I don't know if we got down to that granularity, but I think we can clarify that here. So what we have said is that you can utilize your platform, your Zoom or whatever, you know, platform that you're using, and as long as there is a kind of a stamp time, you can pull the chat, you can pull the attendance, you can see when people enter and exit the meeting. And that's what you should be, you know, you can use to determine time on task or contact hours for students. So it sounds like in this particular situation, you know, you would get credit for the full time that the student is in the classroom, just like they would be if they were in a regular face-to-face classroom and, you know, working on packets, but the teacher is present and able to assist the student, you know, as questions arise.
Great, thanks for that clarification. That helps. I'm seeing something in the chat, which I think is a really good question. How are you working with students who lack the technology skills, and probably the technology too? You know, what kinds of approaches have y'all been doing? And I think somebody's trying to talk there. And I'm going to just do a shout out for a program for a session on Monday that Elena's doing with a number of providers on digital literacy skills and what those kind of onboarding look like, both now in the pandemic and then how you can ramp this up for the future. So I see Rachel's responding that they're doing a lot of telephone logs or conversations on phones. And Denise, we have a lot of support when we first started for students and instructors, pretty much through the packet approach. So that was getting people engaged at that point. I'm going to go back to a little bit more on the surveys because I think the IET piece of this, I know I was pretty surprised by the findings in terms of what you all are doing on a day-to-day basis with, let's see if I can share this, with your IETs, and how many of y'all actually had programs going. So workforce preparation activities, such a good AEL activity. Most all of y'all have re-engaged, whether they're attached to IETs or not. So I think that's really a good portion of you all. The people that are doing their AEL contextualized, that many of y'all are continuing that regardless of whether the training service is going on. And I think this is the next piece I wanted to kind of get some more feedback on from you all. So about 51 of y'all have your AEL services that are contextualized. You may not have your training program. And what you said on the next piece was insightful too, that really only 13 programs have IET training services occurring, and that meaning that you actually have a training that's occurring with your AEL and your workforce prep, and you've got students. So 19 other programs have been pretty much trying to scale back up to where they were. So they're not yet at the point they were when we went into the pandemic, but we've got programs that are doing some kind of training, workforce prep, and AEL. So if you look at that all together, we've really got about 33 entities providing training. Obviously, there's probably multiple going on at a provider. So on that topic, you know, can we talk a little bit, kind of connect the dot with what Mahalia was saying for the planning for the fall and what's really happening right now, and what Nancy was saying. I think, you know, Nancy, you all going back to some face-to-face, you know, those things are rolling out across the state. I heard from many people in this survey that they were in very limited ways starting to experiment with 5 people in a class. And I'll call out South Texas College on this because there was also a good article about their engagement in this way. And I know Chris is on another training, but if anybody's there that might want to speak to this, that these are some of the other issues I wanted to put out there and see what you all are finding with the institutions you're working with for face-to-face again. STC said, for instance, they have 15 people in a cohort. Instead of having now 1 classroom, they've got to have 3 classrooms so they can properly distance. And then they have an instructor or multiple training instructors who are having to move through the rooms. So just to kind of follow up into how do you plan going forward for what's going to be an option at your institution? What more are you hearing, and you know, how are you looking at this?
Okay, this is Chris out from Region 1.
Yes.
Yeah, we've been partnering with a little program also for a CNA school. And one of the things, I mean, that we're finding, of course, is sometimes just to, I don't know, assure the safety of your students, potential students, I've learned myself that I actually have to go do a physical assessment of the facilities, of the training rooms, of the specific rooms where they'll be having clinicals and things to see if if it. I mean, while they while most companies have a work safe plan right now, and they've had to submit it to the city and both to the county judge. You oftentimes, as a director, I have found out that I've actually got to go into the field and make the assessment myself, for the safety of students. And then when it comes to the CNA certifications, those aren't being offered, anyway, until the end of June. So it's like you're having to search for new ways of ensuring, number one, the safety of your students, number two, the continuation of the program that they're in, and how they're going to be garnering those, certifications with limited testing. And when they do test, what's the setting going to be? Can they do it remotely at this time? That's not feasible. So honestly, I think everybody's just kind of like working with this as they go through. But what I have found out for myself is, I want to go in, with a measuring stick. Is this exactly 6 feet? Can you really, do what you say that you can do? And I think all of us are just trying to, create our own operating procedures right now so that we can figure how to go, face to face as soon as possible. And luckily, our partner STC has, they've got great facilities where that is feasible, but there are others, other partners that may not have access to those type of buildings and things like that. So trying to figure out, like, how do we serve our students? How do we get them in? And I mean, I've got other programs, that we were going to get started before COVID started, an electrical program. And it's like the training room is great, and they can work outside, but you've got to make your own decisions. But by the same token, you worry because of the unemployment rate, that we're experiencing. Starr County is #1 in the state, and so it's like you've got a sense of urgency to do something, but by the same token, you are limited by what's available and how students can be accommodated and how I can guarantee their safety.
That's a really good summary. I really appreciate you sharing that, Maria. I think Anson's been saying, he's really looking at this as a long-term capacity building issue. So, all of these things take time and take an intensity of time. So we really appreciate the kind of details y'all are really giving us today. Let me, I think probably Mahalia, if you're seeing anything in the chat room, I'm going to put up the trainings. And this was interesting. And we did ask you all to share what kinds of trainings you're looking at going forward, and how those trainings will, fit in your planning. So there was an amazing number of them. It's probably more like about a third or a half of what originally y'all have had in teams over the course of the year. So I know that it's, downsizing. And when you look at this list, you see the items that probably have a lot of facility for going to online remote instruction, and putting off the face-to-face. Although I still see some CNA in some areas of the state. Someone said they're opening up testing for CDL. There's some partial work being done there. That was one of the largest programs that was going on across the state prior to COVID. So as you're looking at these options and you're working with your training institution, what are the most significant? I mean, if you're not that training institute, what are you hearing from them? Does anybody want to talk about that? I know it's it's 10:47 and we've got only about 10 minutes left if we go a little bit over. But from this conversation, I think what I'm doing is taking some really specific discussion points, and I think we could get together and have particular people really share some unique strategies. And going forward, you all have been good about doing this on the spur of the moment here, and we really appreciate that. But
one thing, Anne, we had a question come in a little while back, and I think it was from Christina Mason. And I think what I'm understanding, and Christina, you can unmute yourself and ask it if I'm misinterpreting it. But she said, is it possible to do the workforce training to allow like asynchronous online training programs to report training hours? Similar to how DL has proxy hours that are allowed. And I'm interpreting that as if you have a training provider that is providing some sort of asynchronous option for people to continue to engage in workforce training, can you put those hours in Teams? I mean, the answer to that is yes. The training hours were much more flexible on, because again, that's really, up to the institution to decide how they're going to accredit those hours on the training side. So those are we have a lot more flexibility on that. It's really the direct hours, which is focused on our core business, which is the basic skills that we, put the restrictions on for synchronous learning. So I don't know if that answers your question, Christina, but I just wanted to put that out there before we moved on with the next
Christina,
phase.
Yeah, I appreciate you asking that, because, I have had that question several times, and since those training hours don't contribute to direct hours and improvement, essentially, you're not teaching literacy, basic skills improvement, math improvement as an AEL direct hour. That's nice to have that flexibility. So we still want you to track the training hours that institution would award, which is probably much easier, through an institution that has an established. If someone passes this training course, we're going to award them such and such many contact hours, that you can then report in Teams. But great question, and I appreciate you bringing it up, because I've seen that question multiple times, and it may be in the forthcoming FAQ. So, thanks. And I've gotten out of the chat box again, Mahalia. So if you see anything else, I know we're getting close to the end. It's 10:50, and in some semblance of trying to end early or end on time, I wanted to just kind of hit these hot topics for next time, and a way that we can share these resources with you so you have a place to go. We're looking at those opportunities. So who's doing what training in the occupational areas, people in the survey. And as I said last night, I really drilled into it. We've got some people that are really moving forward with total remote IETs through the workforce prep, the AEL, and the training, for which their institution had never done that before. So I'd like to hear out from them, and I'll look at setting some of that up for next time. A lot of people had questions about that, both to me directly and internally. And then also a number of you all had mentioned doing IETs with an employer as an option during COVID. And a couple of y'all had put into the comment box that you were working with employers and working for, doing an IET, so including training and those basic skills. So I want to hear more about that next time. If that may be some, unique option if that opens up in your area. And then, of course, we'll do some TA, and we have lots of things on our plate, it looks like, but we will get you some specific TA support for the MSG report for your IETs. And then I think Anson will probably have an update on the demand occupations forthcoming here pretty soon. And I'll keep tracking the resource availability for y'all that have asked, where can we get that? Like, for instance, Denise's great list, we'll send that out. And if anybody else has anything to share, go ahead and send it to our ELTA box, and I'll get it to Train PD and get it in the portal. That's been one of our places that we've shared a lot of that material. So let me make a couple of more announcements, because I just wanted to say that there's a couple of conferences coming up. Let's see, on the 29th, the IET, we'll have our next IET state call. On the 12th of June and the 19th of June, there's a 3-hour Texas Peer Mentor Network online conference. You'll get registration this week. And then we'll have one other call after that in June for IETs. Lots of rich things going on. I will continue to try to capture this and find ways to share this in the best way that, meets some needs for you all. So thank you all for being on the call today. I'm going to stay on till 11 if anybody has any sidebars or any more questions, but if there's anything else we want to hit on in the chat pod, Mahalia, let me know.
We've just got a lot of thank yous for the information. Thank you. And I would just reiterate what Ann said. We are really trying to create a space so that you guys have a peer network that you can go to, and we're pushing the PD portal and the community of practice. Some of you are very active in there, and we really appreciate that, and we're going to start trying to have a better presence in there at the state level, just because there's no point in kind of recreating the wheel. TCAL's done a great job. They've gotten this space for us, and we want to be able to utilize it. So I really just appreciate everybody being on the call. You guys are all rock stars. And sharing like this, I can't tell you how beneficial it is for programs who are, struggling or in those sort of conceptual phases of all of this, and they're trying to figure it out. As those of you who have already went through it know what a daunting task it can be, and kind of where do you start. So I really appreciate everybody participating.
So ditto on that. Thank you all very much. And Lori sent me a quick text that, we can put these resources, as Mahalia was saying, they'll go into the portal. I didn't mean to say this session will be on the website. It won't be, but I do take all of your chat. Your chat has been very rich on all these calls. And if there are questions, I turn those into questions and add them into the FAQ. So follow up on that. Don't hesitate to send us an email with more questions that you feel you need some written guidance on. So thank you all again. Really appreciate you being on the call today. There were lots of things going on today, and I know a lot of full half-day trainings too for a lot of programs. So thanks for joining us, and you guys have a wonderful rest of the day and a good weekend.
Thank you, Ann.
Thank you. And thank you all for sharing. Really appreciated it.
Thank you, Ann. Bye-bye.
Bye.